Welcome back to the Meeple Marathon and our continued coverage of Nemesis by Awakened Realms. Today we're going to be talking about how to set up the game and then how to play the game. So first things first, we are going to start with setting up the main game board. There is a fair amount of cardboard here and a decent amount of setting up, but it's pretty straightforward. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take all of the number 2 room tiles. You're going to give these a shuffle. Now there are more number 2 tiles than there are actually spaces on the board for number 2 rooms. These are the kind of specialty rooms. They represent variations in the ship, but are not integral to advancing the main storylines or they don't interfere with any of the objectives or anything like that. And you'll notice that on the main side of the board, they are the first ones you'll interact with upon leaving the hibernatorium. This is essentially where everybody's going to start. So you're going to have some extras. Put these back in the box face down. Then you're going to take all your number 1 room tiles, give them a shuffle, and you're going to place them out around the board on all the spots that have a number 1. And you'll notice that all of the number 1s will end up on the board. That's because these are the rooms that need to be present in every game, or else people wouldn't be able to complete certain objectives, and it just wouldn't be fair. So keep that in mind when you're playing, that more than likely the rooms that you need to find in order to complete your objectives are going to be along the outside of the ship and not the interior. Okay, so once we have our room tiles set up, we need to place all of these tiles out. So I just had stored them in the Nemesis bag to help shuffle them up, but you don't want to know what these are, so you do need to go through and give them all, mix them all up, get them all facing the right way, give them a little shuffle, and then you're basically just putting 1 on every single tile. Whoops. It doesn't matter where you start with, and there are going to be some leftovers too. So you just want to make sure that every room tile has 1. Okay, we are good. So these are going back in the box again. Don't look at those. Just put them back in the box face down. Okay, then next up we want to go ahead and place our engines. There are 3 engines. They're each marked 1, 2, and 3, and you'll notice that each engine has a working and a damaged token. You want to take these and shuffle them up. I know it's hard to shuffle just 2, but try and shuffle them and think about something else so you aren't keeping up with where they are. Once they are significantly shuffled, don't look at them, put them face down with just the number sticking up. So you're going to do this for all 3 engines. This way, at the beginning of the game, you are unsure as to which ones may be working and which ones may be malfunctioning. Whichever tile is on top is the state of the engine. But you can go back to the engine rooms and do a repair action and swap the tiles so that the working one is on the top. Or you may want the ship to explode, so you're going to deliberately set them to malfunction. Who knows? Okay. Next up, we need to go ahead and put out the escape pods. You want to make sure you put them out on the locked side first. You can see here on the time track that, it's the self-destruct track where they automatically open up, or you can open them up via other means. But for right now, they always start on the lock side, and the number that you put out depends on the player count. So we are we're setting up right now for a solo game, so we are instructed to simply put 2 out. So you're going to put the number 1 at A, the number 2 at B, and then you would go back and forth if you had to add more. All right. There is also a dead space trooper token, or if you have the terrain expansion, this would be a small miniature. This is going to go in the center of the room in the Hypatorium at the beginning of every game. You're going to start with a dead trooper right there. You also want to go ahead and grab at least 2 of these, but I usually go ahead and grab 3 of these flattened glass beads. You're going to put one on the 15 track on the time tracker. Some people, you do not start there. All right, you actually start on the green space. You start on 15, and then during every event phase, you tick down. So you can go ahead and put one over here by the self-destruct track, but do not put it on until instructed to do so. And then you're going to take your last one and you're going to put it up here on the B for the coordinates track. After you put the token there, you can go ahead and grab your coordinates deck, give it a shuffle, and take one without looking at it and place it over here in the coordinates section. So all that means is that currently the ship is traveling to location B on the coordinates card, but since we don't know what that is, we would have to either travel up here to the the pilot station, or there are other cards that we might be able to use or locations that we can check the coordinates. But for right now, we're headed to B, but we don't know where B is until we go look at that card. All right. Let me see. Am I missing anything else? No. So that is everything you need to set up the board. All right, next up, you want to make sure that you have shuffled and set up all the various decks that you need and created your token pools. So you can see all of my smaller item cards are here separated by color. The blue ones do not necessarily have to be shuffled, and they don't even have to be face down. Those are the cards that you gain once you craft an item, and you are specifically crafting a specific item, so you would simply just look through that deck and choose out the one that you've crafted. The rest of these, though, you're going to shuffle up and create space for a draw pile and a discard pile. I just happen to be using my Arkham card tower here because it functions well. Then you're also going to want to shuffle up the Serious Wound deck, the Intruder Attack deck, and the Event deck. Also, make sure you have your pool of dice somewhere and your pool of tokens. Now, especially if you're playing solo, you don't necessarily need all of them out. The most tokens you're going to be putting out are noise tokens, a fair amount of fire tokens. You could probably go ahead and pull out all 8 malfunction tokens. 2 or 3 doors is probably about the max you're going to need, and some damage tokens. These are also your ammo tokens. But that's pretty much it. You don't need to pull everything out of the box. You could even, if you wanted to, leave the box close by if you can reach it easily. But that is essentially all you need to do to set up your token and card pool. All right, last but not least, you are going to need to set up your Intruder Board, and then we'll talk about setting up your player board. So let's start here with the Intruder Board. Every Intruder Board needs to first have 3 weaknesses added to it. So you're going to take this small deck of cards, you'll give it a little shuffle, and you will deal 1 card into each section of the Intruder Board. So what this means is that if you find, say, the character corpse, which we know starts in the Hibernatorium, and we may run into others, if we can get the character corpse to the laboratory and analyze it, we can then flip over this one. If we get our hands on an egg, take it to the lab and analyze it, we can flip over this one. If we happen to kill an intruder that leaves its carcass behind, then we can carry that to the lab and reveal this one. So each one of these gives us a small advantage against the intruders. But we don't know what those are until we have analyzed that specific thing. So then you're going to want to take 5 egg tokens, put them here in this area of the Intruder Board. And then you're going to want to set up your intruder bag. You're going to build your bag. So we're going to start by putting in 1 blank, 4 larva tokens, 1 creeper token, 4 adult tokens, and 1 queen. You do not put any breeder tokens in the beginning. You can give that a shuffle, and then you want to make sure you can see that I have the other tokens organized in nice neat piles over here, because you're going to be asked to pick up specific tokens and add them to the bag throughout the game. So there is your intruder bag. Also, you want to make sure that you have, I just set these over by my intruders. These if this is your contamination deck, it looks on the back exactly like your action deck for your players. You're going to want to shuffle this up, similar to your serious wounds, intruder attack, and event deck. Have that off to the side. All right, over here on our player board, we can go ahead and take our miniature, stick that in the hibernatorium, because that's where every game of Nemesis starts. You wake up in the hibernatorium. You can also take a player aid card. This is not as necessary if you're playing solo, but it is helpful because it has the player phases here. If you are playing cooperative, it is very necessary because it keeps track of your player number and also allows you to tell others when you are going to pass. I'm sorry, not cooperative, competitive, or the semi-co-op, or semi-co-op competitive game. Anyways. All right, then depending on your player, you're going to want to pull out your 10 specific player action cards. So they're color coded, so you can see my pilot is green. She's got the green ring around her. Her cards are green. You want to shuffle these up and create a draw pile here on the left side of her player board. All right, then you also want to take all of the smaller cards here. These are the same size as the coordinates cards, and you're going to want to find your quest card and starting item cards. Again, they are color coded according to your player. So your starting item, you can go ahead, flip over, and add. More than likely, it's going to need a hand. So you can put it in one of your hands, left hand or right hand, it doesn't matter. All right, so we've put that in her hand. These other two quest cards need to be, you need to take an action, usually in a specific location, or discard a certain thing to be able to flip them over. Once you flip them over, then they become items that are specific to the pilot that you can then use. So looking at these, we can see that I can discard an energy charge, which is an item, spend one card to do it, and then I get to flip this over. And this one is activate this item in the fire control system. So all I have to do is be in the fire control system room, which is one of the standard #1 rooms. It's always going to be in the game. Be in that room, spend one card, I get to flip this card over. So you can either set these off to the side somewhere, you could put them in here. If you're playing solo, it's fine to put them in here because nobody can see the back of them, but if you're playing competitively, you may not want your competition to know what these cards are, even though once you've played a couple times, it's not like you shuffle these up and draft one or two. You're going to know exactly what these are. So I usually just set them down here so I can keep up with them. All right, last thing you need to do is get your objective cards. So in a solo or cooperative game, you're going to shuffle up this solo and cooperative deck, deal 2 to each player. You can look at these in the cooperative game, you can share this information, and you don't even have to choose one until the first encounter in the game, which means the first time an intruder comes out onto the board. At that point, then you can decide which objective you are going to choose. So you simply just want to put these two off to the side. Now, if you are playing a competitive game, you're going to want to shuffle each one of these decks up separately, removing ones that would say, if you're only playing like a 2-player game, some of these will say they're 5+. So unless you're playing with 5 people, you remove that card. But shuffle each one of these up separately, deal 1 to each player. Those are their objectives. Again, you want to keep these secret though from the other players. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you set up for a game of Nemesis. So now let's talk about how to play Nemesis. Okay, now that we have the board set up, our player boards, the Intruder Board, all of our decks and supplies ready to go, we are ready to learn how to play the game. So the each round per se is broken up into 2 phases. Those are the player phase and the event phase. We always start with the player phase, so let's talk about that because that's when you, as the character, are going to take all of your actions. So you can see on your board here, they list off all of the basic actions that you can take at any point in time, and they simply cost a single card to take that action. So you don't have to have a card that says move on it. You don't have to have a card that says shoot on it. You can always shoot a assuming you have a weapon to shoot with. Actually, if you don't, then you can always do a melee attack. You can always pick up a heavy object. You can always trade with another character in your same room, and you can always craft an item, which is very handy. You don't need to find a tool bench or anything like that. If you simply have, and you can see this whole section on crafting, if you have these 2 items down here, you can craft a Molotov cocktail. And you can do that in any room, because essentially you've got the bandages, you've got the lighter, boom, you're gonna be able to make a Molotov cocktail even if you're in the computer room or something like that. So let's talk about the basic actions first. Again, to do all these actions, you simply discard any card in your hand. You always start the player phase by drawing up to 5 cards. So that's your hand limit, unless, you know, there may be a card or an item or something like that that increases it or decreases it, say an injury. But for the most part, your standard hand limit is 5. So all of these cards here could be spent to take that basic action. But similar to the same mechanic that Marvel Champions uses from Fantasy Flight Games and is a very popular game right now, all of the cards in your hand can either be spent to do certain actions like interact with the computer, or do repairs, or search, or rest, or search again. All of these are very important actions and could be exactly what you need, but you can't save them all. You have to spend some of these cards in order to complete the other actions, or even to complete repairs. You're going to say have to give up computer skills. And I think that's where a lot of, you know, what makes this game good is the tough decisions at any given moment. What do I give up? What do I hold on to? Is it worth it to take that one last action on my turn before going into the event phase and not have any cards in hand when the intruders attack? You know, and I think that's a great mechanic. I'm seeing more and more games do it, the kind of multi-use cards things, where the cards are not only your currency, but they're also give you the actions you can take. So that is, anytime you see the number, that's what you're doing. You're having to discard that many cards out of your hand. What is nice about Nemesis, though, is you only have a 10-card deck. This isn't like a deck builder either, where you're going to be adding a lot of cards to your deck. Really, the only thing you're going to be adding are contamination cards, which kind of muck up your deck and could kill you at the end of the game. Other than that, you pretty much have the 10 cards you start with, and that's about it. So you go through these actions pretty quickly, and you'll see them again, you know, within the next couple turns or whatever. But let's talk about these basic actions. The first one is movement. That's very obvious, and when you take a movement action, you simply move from one room to the other. There's no run action, there's no sprint action, there's no, you know, run through 3 rooms action. Every time you move on this board, it is from one room to the next, and then you have to stop in the next room. But if you notice, there are 2 ways you can move. You can either take a basic action movement, or you can spend 2 cards to do a careful movement. Well, that's because if I were to simply just move into this room along this connected pathway here, I'm going to have to conduct a noise roll. That means I was just walking like normal, maybe talking to a buddy or talking on the radio, it doesn't matter. I was not being very careful in my movement, and I was making noise as I entered this room. So anytime you take a normal movement, you're going to have to roll this noise die. This is a 10-sided die with the numbers 1 through 4, but then also this X symbol on one of the sides that represents silence. You actually were quite careful. Or this one, which represents danger, and you made way too much noise. So when you enter into any room, whether it's explored or not, you have to do a noise roll. In this instance, you would say that the noise we made traveled down corridor 2, or something down corridor 2 heard us. So these are your noise tokens, these yellow let go style things. That goes into corridor 2. If at any point in the game before that may be cleared, if I make noise down corridor 2 again, where if I were instructed by any rules of the game to place a second token there, instead of placing a second token there, we have an encounter. Basically an intruder. We've made too much noise. The intruder comes down that hallway and is in the room with us. So that's bad. So Normal movement is okay when you have a lot of opportunities that you can make noise and you're not worried about possibly running into an encounter. But say, for example, say we have circled back around here and we'd worked our way around, we're back in the hibernatorium, and we want to enter this room, which already has 1, 2, 3 noise markers. There's only ever 4 entrances or 4 hallways into a room. Some of those are technical corridors, which you can see, for example, right here. This would be considered a technical corridor. This is like the air vents, that you don't normally walk down, but certainly an intruder, an alien, could make his way down. So this red dot represents like the air vents and the air ducts, the technical corridors. But there's always 4 numbers worth of corridors. Sometimes you'll see, like right here, that 3 and 4 are combined because 1 and 2 over here, so there's actually only 2 hallways. So you can actually only make noise twice in this room. But I'm getting kind of long-winded here. Say we want to move into this room and ensure that we don't make noise anywhere except this hallway. We do a careful movement. You're spending twice as many cards, but you get to choose. Instead of rolling this black die and risking your fate to the die, you get to choose. You still have to put a noise marker down, but you get to choose where it goes. So in this instance, I could say, I'm going to put it in 3. Now, if for some reason you circle back around to this room again, you might as well just run into that room all hell-mel, because unless you roll the silence, which is a 1 in 10 chance, you're going to have an encounter. You've drawn too much attention to this room during the course of the game. So that's movement, both careful movement and basic movement. Every time you move, you have to place a noise token down. Intruders have very good hearing, and they are going to hear you wherever you go in the ship. All right. Shoot and melee attack are essentially the same thing. Just with a shoot action, you have to have a weapon and it has to have ammo. So you can see, for example, here, the starting weapon for the pilot is a shotgun. It has 2 starting ammo, so I would put 2 red cubes on here. And that says every time you deal at least 1 injury, deal 1 additional injury. So that's good. That's, the bonus of having the shotgun. But I'm certainly going to have to find some ammo to reload this thing in some way. But you have to have a weapon. All of the weapons in this game, I believe, are ranged weapons, at least that I've seen. Could be not, but really the only difference between shooting and doing a melee attack is the fact that if you do a melee attack, you are at risk of becoming contaminated because you've gotten too close to the intruder. But essentially, if you want to do a melee attack or a shooting attack, you simply discard a card. Then hopefully you have a weapon to use. You would remove an ammo from that card, and you're going to roll this die. All right, this is a basic D6, but it's obviously does not have your standard 6 numbers on it. So what you are hoping to do is hit on the symbol that is, and when I say symbol, I mean the symbol of the intruder. Hit on the symbol that is of your intruder you're attacking or better. So if we look at this, there's actually only 1 miss. So that's good. Then there are 2 of the creeper symbols. All right. And then there's 1 adult symbol. And then there are these other symbols which are essentially hit anything targets or hit anything twice targets. So I know that's kind of confusing. That all of a sudden they go from the intruder symbols to these target symbols, but essentially what this means is that a larva token, which is the tiny little claw mark, gets hit by it. As long as you don't roll a miss, you hit a larva, you kill a larva. For these other ones, basically if you are attacking an adult and you were to roll this symbol, the creeper symbol, you've missed. But if you are attacking a creeper and you rolled the adult symbol, since in the hierarchy it goes larva, creeper, adult, breeder, queen, as long as you have a good enough shot to hit an adult, you also have a good enough shot to hit a creeper, which would also hit a larva. You'll notice that there's not symbols for the queen or the breeder because the queen and the breeder have to get these, which again, I'm not I guess they just wanted to give you the opportunity to roll a double hit. You know, they could have like made this the breeder symbol and then this double hit. I don't know. But that's what these means. This one means it will hit anything. Breeder, queen, anything below it. This one means that you hit twice. You got lucky with your shot. But that's essentially it. You are essentially discarding one card, removing an ammo from your card, and rolling that die, hoping for the outcome. So you're going to be slowly ticking away these intruders. But anytime you damage an intruder, what you're going to do is come over here to your intruder deck, your intruder attack deck, which is used for multiple things, but in this case we are simply going to draw the top card. I'm looking at the bottom one this time so I don't have to reshuffle it, and you're looking at this number up here. What this means is essentially the amount of damage that the intruder has to have suffered for it to be killed. So if you've just hit an intruder for the first time and you flip this over and it's a 4, you didn't do enough damage to kill it. But say you have hit it for the second time, say you took your 2 actions in your turn and you shot this thing twice, you hit it twice, and you reveal this card, it will now be killed because that's all it took. Now there are also some symbols like this with this arrow, and that means that the intruder has had enough. Maybe you hit it and it's, you know, soft belly parts or something, it didn't like it, and it actually retreats, it disappears off the map. So that is how you conduct an attack action, either shoot or melee attack. Pick up heavy object, trade, and craft item are very self-explanatory. Essentially, anytime you have a human carcass, you know, a dead astronaut, or if you die, you leave behind a dead carcass, or an intruder carcass, or an egg. Those are the heavy objects in the game. Essentially, those are tokens that will be placed down on the board that you have to pick up, and you have to have a hand slot for them. So, you know, our weapon is going to go in one hand. You're going to have to use your other hand to carry the heavy object around. But you obviously have to be in the same room to spend a card to pick up the object. Trade is the same way. You have to spend a card to then trade any number of items. You can't trade your action cards. You're just trading item cards with you and another character. Say, you know, they've got the cloth and you've got the fire. You guys could trade. You don't have to trade one for one. They could just give you the cloth. And the last thing is craft item. Again, you have to discard a card, but as long as you have 2 items with these matching symbols on them, you just go to the blue craft item deck and pick out the card of the item that you just crafted. And obviously you discard the 2 cards, the 2 items that you used. Okay, so those are all the basic actions. Now, the fun of the various characters comes from their unique decks. Now, everybody has, you know, a search card. Everybody has a rest card, but sometimes the text down here could read differently. You know, the repairs card, for some people, it costs 2 cards to do a repair. Now let's take this one for example. Repair says discard a malfunction marker from the room you are in, or repair, break the engine in the engine room you were in. It says repair, break because your objective in a competitive game could say crash the ship. And so you could secretly go to the engine room and say, yes, I'm repairing it. And, you know, in true trader mechanic, actually break the engines. So repairs can actually be the opposite. But so say you want to discard the malfunction marker in a room you're in, because a malfunction marker keeps the room from working. You cannot do the room action if there's a malfunction marker on it. So you have to spend this card, the repair card, but you also have to discard a card. So say I will discard search and I will spend repairs to then remove the malfunction marker. But if you are in a room and you want to conduct search, since it's 0, all you have to do is give up the search card. You don't get to keep the search card. You still have to give up the card you're actioning. You just don't have to spend other cards to do so. So, you know, again, there's always going to be kind of basic cards like search, rest, repair, computer skills. But each character is going to have a set of unique cards, and each one of them, you know, the cost may be different for various things. Usually rest, search, those are always going to be free. But essentially, you can do these at any time in place of a basic action. The last action you can do, and I'm going to just come over here and pull up one of these room tiles that I did not use, is a room action. You can see the symbol is exactly the same. It looks like a card, and it tells you the name of the room, airlock control, and then it gives you what the action is that you can complete. And this says start emergency depressurization. Now that's a very quick abbreviation of what you can do in this room, and what I would recommend you to do is keep the room reference sheet handy, because even I have not memorized what all the rooms do. But if you are in this room and there is not a malfunction token on it, which we just talked about, if that is on that, that means you can't do this action. You cannot start the emergency depressurization because the airlock control room is malfunctioning. But as long as the malfunction marker is not there, you can spend 2 cards to then do this action. You don't have to discard a 3rd card. You don't have to have an airlock control card. You discard any 2 cards from your hand, and you can start the emergency depressurization. There's a couple other things on this room tile that we're going to talk about here in a second, but that is it basically for your actions. Now, where's my player aid card? You can see here that you always start the player phase by drawing up to 5 cards. Then you move the first player token. That's pretty straightforward. And then you perform actions, 2 actions on each player's turn. So if you're playing solo, this really doesn't matter. You just continue to take actions until you don't have the cards to spend and there's no more actions you can take. And then you move on. Then you have to pass. But you can see here that normally you would just perform 2 actions on each player's turn. Then you continue to repeat step 3 until everybody passes. So that means that you could move. That's 1 action, and then you could say pick up this heavy object and then move into this room. That's your 2 actions, and then if you're playing with say 3 people, play passes to the left. They do 2 actions, then the next person does 2 actions, then it comes back to you. Then you can say search the room and do the action in the room, and then it's going to pass again, and then maybe you decide to move again. So and that being able to everybody take a few actions and then pass, and not just having one person take all of their action, does make a difference in competitive mode, because you guys might be fighting over the same things. So that is essentially how the player phase works. You essentially are just continue taking actions until you choose to pass. Once everyone has passed, you move into the event phase. So let's talk about the event phase. What do we need to do on here? First of all, we're going to move the time track. Remember, it was this little glass bead. We move it 1 down. It starts at 15, and it slowly ticks towards the ship jumping to hyperdrive. Also, the other bead that we place down, if you have started the self-destruct track, that also moves 1 space. But unless you have started the self-destruct track, you don't move that bead. Then we're going to come down here to intruder attack. Now, intruder attack is only relevant if there is an intruder in the same room as a character. So even if there is an intruder in the room next door, it does not attack. All right, it doesn't run in, it doesn't smell you. The intruder has to be in your same room. In that instance, when the intruder attacks, we're going to come back to our deck here. You're going to flip over the top card, and you're going to look at these symbols here. So in this instance, only the creepers would do anything. And in this instance, you would see they transform, and it says replace the attacking creeper with a breeder if available. If the player has no cards in hand, the breeder makes a surprise attack. We'll talk more about that in a second here. For example, here is Frenzy. If you were to draw this card and you were facing off against an adult, there's no adult symbol here, so you completely ignore. The adult just stares at you. You have a staring contest. Now, a lot of the cards, will look like this, where it's almost all of the symbols except for the larva symbol. That means all of them are going to scratch you. You suffer a light wound and get a contamination card. But that's pretty much it. You basically just flip over the top card. You look for the symbol of the intruder that's in the room with you. If you see it, you do the action below. If not, then nothing happened. If you take a light wound, you will simply put one of those markers here. If you take a second one, you move it down. And if you were to take a third one and you would move it down again, you instead take a serious wound card. Or sometimes you are directed directly to take a serious wound card, in which case you would draw one of these cards. What a serious wound does is gives you a part of your body that is injured and then gives you a negative effect. So for example, your hand injury says the cost of all your item actions is increased by 1. So if we look back over here, say at the Molotov cocktail, which we've talked about ad nauseum, you have to spend a card to use the Molotov cocktail. If you have a hand injury, this becomes 2. You have to spend 2 cards to use the Molotov cocktail. Or arm. This character only has 1 hand slot, so you can no longer carry your weapon and a heavy object. Bleeding. Each time you pass in the player phase, you suffer 1 light wound. Here is you only draw 4 action cards instead of 5 because you have a body injury. So all of these serious wounds give you a negative effect in some way. So that's what happens on Intruder Attack and when you get wounded. Next, you move to the fire damage step. So this is basically any character or intruder that is in the same room as fire, a fire token, that means the room is on fire, takes a wound. In our case, we just take a light wound. In the intruder's case, you add a token to their card, and then, like we said before, you draw an intruder card and you look at this number. So a intruder could end up like in a room with fire on it. Say you shot it in another room and it followed you, and then you light that room on fire and you're willing to take a light wound. An intruder could be killed off by fire. It could happen. Or it could retreat from fire. Next, we're going to resolve an event card. So this is our third deck of the standard size cards. So let's look at the bottom one here. You're going to do everything on the event card from top to bottom. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to see multiple symbols of intruders. Again, if you don't see the symbol of an intruder that is on the board, for example, there's no adult intruder symbol right here, and if an adult is the only one on the board, then they don't do anything. But otherwise, this is for movement. So you would simply look and you would move all of these types of intruders that are on the board down corridor 4. So say for example, this guy was in our room with us. Even if we are in this room, because it's already attacked, and we drew this card, well, technically this is not an adult. So that's a bad example here. Let's get out one of the big guys. Say you have a breeder here, which is this symbol. The breeder's already attacked us during the intruder attack step. We draw this and it says it wants to go down corridor 4, so it's actually going to run down here and go into this room, down out of camera. Now, say for example, we drew this now, and this is where the breeder was. He's going to come down corridor 4, and he's going to be in the room with us. So we essentially move the intruders around the ship with this top part. This number is only ever going to be 1, 2, 3, or 4. Then we're going to read here at the bottom. This one happens to say, set the item counter to 0 in each room with a fire marker. Place a fire marker in each room neighboring a room with a fire marker. Fire does not spread through closed doors to corridors. So most of these things are bad, but you simply go through the text of the event card, reading it out if you're playing with other people, and following the instructions. Pretty straightforward. Again, usually it's not good. And then the last thing is the intruder bag development step. Now, I'm not going to cover everything that happens in this step because for me, I also still need to a lot of times reference the rule book or a player aid or something like that. This is the one player aid that I feel like Awakened Realms should have included in the game, was a intruder bag development player aid card. Similar to this, but with this what each symbol means when you pull it out of the bag. But essentially you're going to take your intruder bag here, you're going to give it a shake, and you're going to draw 1 token out of the bag. And that 1 token means something, and they all mean something different. For example, this is a larva token. What this means is that this larva has now grown into an adult intruder. I keep wanting to say alien, and I'm sure I'll do it eventually. So you remove this token and you replace it in the bag with an adult token, which would look like this, increasing your chances of an adult token being drawn later on in the game, which is bad because if you were to draw an adult token out of the bag, you do a noise roll. So say you just made, remember how we showed earlier, you did careful movement because this room already had 3 and you carefully moved so you could put your noise token here, and you did all this work to carefully move into this room and not make too much noise. Well, then you get to the intruder bag development step and you draw this sucker and you have to do a noise roll. Well, unless you roll this, you're gonna have an encounter. So, and like I said, I'm not gonna cover what each one of those means. It's in the rule book. My recommendation would be to print out a player aid. You can find a lot of them on BGG, depending on what size you want, but just search for intruder bag development Nemesis player aid or something like that, and you can find them. But you will be, just follow the instructions in the rule book. Basically what you're doing is you're drawing one token out of the bag and then doing whatever action comes with that token, and then that's it. You have finished with the event phase. Remember, we already moved the time marker at the beginning of the event phase, so you don't have to do that. It's basically back to the player phase at that point. So the last thing I want to talk about, which is important to note, is how to, or what to do with the rooms. So anytime you enter a room that is flipped over face down, anytime you enter an unexplored room, you have to flip it over and do a few things. So the first thing you're going to do is, technically you could do it either way, but this one's actually a bad example because that means nothing. I'm pretty sure that means just silence. I actually don't see that one very often. But let's find some of the other ones here. This one, for example, means that room is going to be malfunctioning. This one with the door means that you place a door in the corridor you just came through. So you walk into a room and the door shuts behind you. Happens a lot in movies all the time. This one here means you place a fire token. You walked into a room and the room's on fire. You could see ones with a slime tote marker on it. And that means you walked into a room and it's been covered in intruder slime and you get slimed. You have to put a marker here on the slime portion of your board. You could see one that has the danger symbol on it, which means you basically just add noise all around you to every other corridor. Also, what you see here are numbers at the top. So there's a 1, there's a 2, there's a nice one with a 4. What that means is how many times you can search the room. And you determine that, or you keep track of that, by these numbers around the outside of the room here. So if I were to draw 4 here, if this were to be the token that's on top, that means I could search the airlock control system 4 times, and you'd want to line up the 4 with this red cube, or the cube with the red arrow on it here. Then every time you search, you tick this down, tick, 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 until the arrow is pointing at 0. So every room, you'll notice, has this red arrow somewhere. And so you take this number, you line it up, that same number on the room with the red arrow. That tells you you can search this room 4 times. Once a room is pointing to 0, or if there are no numbers on the room, it can no longer be searched. The last thing that's important to know about the room tiles is the color at the top. So this one you can see has this yellowish color here. It also has this symbol here with the wrench. That means that if you search this room, you're going to draw from this item deck, which is generally tools and stuff. If the room is green, it's going to be a green background, and the symbol on it is going to look like this, which means you're going to get like medical supplies, bandages, first aid kits, things like that. And then there are the red rooms with this symbol on them. You're going to find weapons and ammo in those rooms. There are some rooms where it's a gray background, so it doesn't have a color, but all 3 symbols are in the corner. If you see that, those are the rooms to search, because when you search, you may choose which pile you draw from when you search. Okay, that is pretty much it. That is all that I am going to cover here on this how to play, because I basically just wanted to be able to get you started. There are a lot more rules to the game. There's a lot more nuances to the game. For example, you know, how do you check for infection at the end of the game, and you know, how do you do the coordinates and the navigating things? How do you unlock you know, the escape pods and things like that? Most of those instructions are found on the room reference sheet, because you have to be in a specific room to do those things. So that's why I say keep a room reference sheet handy. It's very rare that you get to the point you have to play a lot of Nemesis to have memorized everything. But I gave you the basics there. You should now at this point be able to either start playing your first game of Nemesis, or sit down with somebody else's copy of Nemesis and play, and be able to understand what you're doing. Pretty much everything else, if you come across it in the game, there's going to be text either on the reference card or on the board or on, you know, your objective card, whatever it is, that's going to help you explain how to complete that action. And as in most games, the rule book clearly states that if there is any text on a card or a token or anything like that that supersedes the rules or contradicts the rule book, you take the card or the token or the game piece for what it's worth. So, all right, that was how to set up and how to play in Nemesis. In our next video, we will be taking the pilot through a full solo playthrough. So that means single player only. Not easy by any stretch of the means, because the board doesn't get any smaller, the ship doesn't get any smaller, and we don't get any more rounds. We still have to complete, you know, an objective and survive. So definitely a challenge, but we're going to give it a go. So look for that in the next video, full playthrough with the pilot using the board we've already set up here. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.